A reading from the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis, the 50th chapter, verses 15 through 21. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?" So they approached Joseph saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, 'I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father.' Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, 'We are here as your slaves.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones.' In this way, he reassured them, speaking kindly to them." The word of God for the people of God. When babies are born, their vision is still developing. They are not yet accustomed to light the way that we are as mature, developed human beings. Babies are fresh out of the womb, and the world is bright and very strange. By the time they reach 7 or 8 months, their eyesight is strengthened. They begin to discover movement, patterns, lights, and shadows. Babies start to become transfixed by televisions, by tablets, by phone screens. If you've ever been around a child and they see that you have a screen in your hand, they are almost magnetically drawn to it. They intuitively know what to do with it, how to operate it, how to use the touch screen. They are transfixed and drawn to the light from these devices. But when they become toddlers, something shifts. Something changes. The same babies who learn to love light often become afraid of the dark. They become fearful, afraid, insecure, because when the light gets low, the shadows start to appear. Children are often afraid of the dark because the shadows that appear from the darkness seem to be what they are not. The shadow from a stuffed animal becomes a monster crouching by the door. The pile of clothes that sits in the corner transforms into a ravenous beast. Children are afraid of darkness, afraid of shadows because of their imaginations. They're afraid because they feel threatened by a thing they do not and cannot understand. They don't understand that when a shadow appears, it is merely a consequence of objects blocking light. A shadow is not a material threat. It's simply a natural consequence. But what about grown folks who feel the same way? I'm convinced that there are people who have a strange fear of what they do not understand, what they cannot comprehend, what seems to be shrouded in the shadows. There's a figure of speech that some folks are afraid of their own shadow. Does it sound familiar? What does that mean? It means you are timid, you are fearful, you are easily frightened. It means you're nervous and jumpy. Some folk just seem like they're always on edge. Have you ever met somebody who seemed like they were afraid of their own shadow? And you know what I mean? You know, the folks who just seem to get disturbed by every little thing. The kind of folks who treat everything they don't understand as a threat, afraid of their shadow. The folks who don't want to face what they have hidden in their own shadows. See, this is the plight of Joseph's brothers. They are grown men who are afraid of their own shadow. Because in their brother Joseph, they are forced to confront the evils of their own past. Now, if you grew up in church like me, you might know the story. Joseph was a baby boy of the family. He was a favorite son. His father showed his favoritism by giving him a beautiful coat of many colors. And Joseph had dreams and visions that were upsetting to his brothers, upsetting to his family. And they couldn't understand, could not comprehend, could not tolerate the idea of him thinking he would have power and authority over them. Joseph was a little too uppity. Joseph didn't quite know his place. Joseph needed to be taught a lesson. Now, they planned to kill him. And one of his brothers, I'm hesitant to call him a hero because it was still a cowardly move. Reuben said, well, don't kill him. Let's just put him in a well. And Reuben decided in his head, I'm going to come back and get him later. But let's let him hang out there for a while to think his life is in peril. But while Reuben was gone, the other brothers saw an opportunity to capitalize on Joseph's life. So they sold him for what amounts to 8 ounces of silver. They traded his life for a handful of coins. And they forgot about him. Because forgetting is easier than facing. But it's funny, life has a way of bringing things to our remembrance. Somehow, some way, life does not always let us get off the hook. Sometimes, as Malcolm X would have put it, our chickens come home to roost. And the bad deeds we did become the shadows we now have to face. And now let me be very clear, this is not a light versus darkness issue. Human beings historically have attached goodness to light and evil to darkness. And not just in metaphorical terms. But you know, the creation story of Genesis chapter 1 informs us that darkness and light work together. See, it takes light to illuminate my day, but I need darkness to rest when it's done. It takes light to put a photograph on film, but I need darkness to develop the negative. Butterflies glisten in the sunlight, but they develop in the darkness of the cocoon. The problem is not darkness. It's what you do with it that matters. Joseph's brothers are afraid of their shadow. Why? Because the darkness is the place where they hide their misdeeds. The darkness is the place where they offset their insecurities, their guilt, their pathologies, their worries, their concerns. If I can just find a scapegoat, if I can just find a place to put all of my problems, I don't have to carry them myself. I get the sense that we can relate to living in a nation where darkness becomes the place where we hide our cultural misdeeds. There's a profound irony of being in a nation whose very founding is at the roots of riot, rebellion, genocide even. And yet folks are shocked and appalled that somebody broke a window, that somebody burned down a pharmacy. And don't misunderstand me. I am not saying those things do not constitute a form of violence. What I am saying is we have a dramatic misunderstanding of scale. Breaking a window is not the same as breaking a people. Burning down a pharmacy is not the same as burning down people's neighborhoods, literally and metaphorically. See, the problem of Joseph's brothers is this: they are afraid because they might get exactly what they deserve. And they're afraid they might get it. See, they know what they did. This isn't a case of misunderstanding or confusion or, well, you know, if we had known then what we know now. No. No excuses, no comfort, no sidestepping. But Joseph doesn't give them what they deserve. Instead, he gives them a chance to live in freedom. Now, I need to be honest about this text. I don't like what some people do with this story. Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good. I think I understand what Joseph is trying to say, but a lot of people, I think, misinterpret the message behind it. There's a temptation to justify all kinds of human evil, only to turn around and say, God intended it for good. This is a flaw in what we might call consequentialist ethics. In other words, a thing is morally justified because it produced a good outcome or consequence. But I have to ask, what in the world does goodness mean in a context where justice and freedom have been perverted? Whose destruction or oppression do we justify in order to get to goodness? How do we justify colonialism and imperialism for the sake of one nation under God? How do we qualify our sense of safety and security through mass incarceration, stop and frisk, 3-strike laws? How do we justify the rise of the Dow Jones through consumptive capitalism? How do we justify having more oil to fuel our various needs and concerns through environmental destruction? See, this is the problem that I think people overlook. Everyone jumps to Joseph's reconciliation, but they never deal with the shadow they're afraid of. What we are facing in this nation, in this moment, in this world right now is a collective reckoning with a shadow that people have feared for ages. The chickens are coming home to roost. The light is being flicked on. The unrest and disruption we face over these past few months are what happened when reconciliation has not happened and cannot happen because there is no recognition. There is no acknowledgement. There is no confrontation of the root cause and the root evil. The fact of the matter is, our nation is afraid of its own shadow. Afraid of the way our footprints have marched across other soils and taken over peoples and lands and destroyed things, all in the name of security, safety, freedom. And you know, I realize everybody doesn't like political sermons. But can I tell you that in times of great evil and great injustice, the worst thing we can do is imagine that there are no political consequences to what we say and what we do. I didn't come here today to tell you who to vote for or where to get off or what you need to do. Rather, I came to share this idea. Are we afraid of our own shadows? You know, it's easy enough to target a nation and to say, this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be overturned, this is what needs to be abolished, but can I turn the light on myself? Can I ask myself, have I confronted the shadows of my own life? Have I confronted my casual racism? Have I gotten inside of my hidden misogyny? Have I reckoned with my latent homophobia? Have I done the work to shed illumination on my shadows? Because let me tell you, the story in the text is a reminder of what happens when shadows are not reckoned with. We have come too far to turn around. We are in times that feel strange and uncertain, but one thing I know for sure: there can be no goodness, no reconciliation, no transformation, no freedom, no justice in the kingdom of God unless we are willing to look our shadows in the face and to say, yes, we know who we have been. Yes, we know what we became. And yes, we know whom we have harmed. And with that acknowledgement, we might finally be ready to walk in the light of God's great kingdom.